Hey guys, welcome back. You're listening to the Ancient Health Podcast. My name is Courtney and we have a really amazing guest. I'm already so excited to continue my conversation because we've been chatting a little bit off air. And I know that this topic of conversation has been circulating all over social media, in the news, talking about metabolic health. But our guest today is Kristin Kirkpatrick, and she is an RD. She is a best-selling author of 2 books, Skinny Liver and Regenerative Health. She's amazing. She is all over the place, speaking on a lot of big platforms, but she's really an expert on liver health and really tying in all these metabolic pieces that you may have questions about. And so we're going to unpack what some of that is today. And I know that this is going to bring some clarity for you around understanding the role of your liver when it comes to your metabolic health. And if you're like, I know I've got metabolic dysfunction, this conversation is for you. So I hope you get so much value from it. I know I've already gained value and we are just beginning. So I know that this is going to serve you. Kristin, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Courtney. I'm so honored and it's a privilege to be here and be able to communicate with your audience. Thank you.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I actually personally feel like the liver does not get the limelight that it should. If there's ever a time where I feel like somebody's complaining about a health problem, I'm like, we need to look at your liver because we talk about the gut a lot, and the gut is obviously like so important, but the liver really is kind of the MVP. If your liver is dysfunctional, and I actually just read something, I think it was yesterday, I saw an Instagram post and it said something to the effect about cancer and its connection to the liver, meaning that if your liver is dysfunctional, then you likely will set yourself up for the potential of cancer replicating in your body. Like, you have to have a healthy liver in order to have a healthy body. And if your liver is dysfunctional for any length of time, you are going to see breakdown in so many areas. So maybe just start us off here and give us an idea of where the liver fits into the picture of the metabolism in general and the metabolic processes of your body.
Yeah, sure. So you're absolutely right. The liver does not get the love and respect that it deserves. And you're super right in the second thing you said, which is that if your liver is not working, guess what? Nothing else will. We don't think about it, but some of the things that the liver does for the body is obviously it filters blood. Okay, so that's a really important one. It goes through detoxification. So anytime you take a medicine, whether that's just something for a headache or you're taking a bunch of herbs, or guess what? You walk outside your front door and you're hit with pollution, right? Anytime you have any kind of toxin within the body, it is the liver's job to detoxify and to get it out of the body. So that's a really important thing. The other thing is the liver is involved in your metabolism of all 3 of our macronutrients. So fat, protein, carbohydrates, right? We think about carbohydrate, fat, and protein, and we think, oh, okay, well, I'm thinking stomach, I'm thinking my guts, I'm thinking maybe the pancreas in some aspect. But the liver plays a huge role in breaking down all of these things and making sure that the nutrients go where they're supposed to. The liver is also involved in energy maintenance. So when the liver senses that, like, perhaps your blood sugar is too low or you need some energy, it has the ability or the power, I would say, to release that energy. So it's able to kind of release some of that stored sugar that you have in the form of glycogen to give you energy and to be able to go through your day. So in addition to that, it produces bile. It helps with blood clotting. It helps with maintenance and making sure that you're metabolizing all your main vitamins and minerals. So it plays like this huge, and by the way, it's the only organ that regenerates. The only organ. Okay. So it's like, I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty amazing, right? But it just plays this huge role. So you're absolutely right. If something is going wrong from a metabolic standpoint, and we look at everything but the liver, we're really missing a huge component of what could be really making us ill.
Yeah, that is a great point. What is the turnover for your liver? Because that might be new information, is thinking that you've got something, an organ that can regenerate itself. How long does it take for that to happen?
Well, okay. So the turnover in terms of like the healing process of the liver, when we look at that, we really look in more of the world of transplantation. So Dr. Hananeh, he was my co-author. I'm always fascinated. Like, I never get bored hearing him talk, because he'll talk about these patients that come in, they need a liver transplant, and then they have a loved one give them part of their liver. And within a few weeks, both of the livers are back to normal. A few weeks. right? So we're not talking about a long time, but I think it also speaks to why the liver doesn't get the attention it deserves, because to get to that point where you need a transplantation takes a long time. So the liver just like takes a beating until it's like, oh my gosh, I'm done. You're going to have to get me a new liver, right? But you have a really long span before you get there, which is why sometimes I don't think we really think about it. We're kind of like, I got plenty of time, right?
Yeah. So this is really fascinating. And I think that something that I didn't realize is the diseases of the liver, for the most part, many of us are familiar with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or just fatty liver disease. And so I would love for you to maybe even define those two, because I think many times we associate disease with tumors or breakdown in other organs, but we don't see that these conditions in the liver can happen to people living what they deem somewhat of a healthy lifestyle. And it can be very, very sneaky and hard to identify. I just read a statistic that said that up to 46% of people in the United States and Europe have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease to some degree. Like they actually have cells in your liver turning to fat. This is a problem, guys. Like this is where the breakdown starts to happen. And when the liver is not functioning, you're not metabolizing your hormones. Like you said, you're not detoxifying well. You're not assimilating nutrients well. You're not producing bile that's helping carry out toxins. Like they're massive downstream effects. So maybe even just define what these disease states of the liver are and who is potentially affected, because I would be willing to bet many of us just assume, oh, my liver's fine. I don't drink alcohol. I don't abuse substances. So my liver's fine. But I'm here to tell you guys, it's more prevalent than you think it is.
Right. Yeah. So let's start with the alcohol component, right? So I talked about the 3 macronutrients, and in dietetic school, we actually learn about 4. Alcohol lives alone. It is its own food group because it has such a different effect on the body. So what we know is that when you consume alcohol in any amount, the liver and the body are automatically like, whoa, there's a toxin coming in. I got to convert it to something that this body understands, and I got to get it out. Those are the 2 main goals. And while the liver does those goals, everything else is just kind of like by the wayside. Right. So I often tell my diabetic patients, the reason your blood sugar goes up, even if you have alcohol that doesn't have sugar in it. So even if you have hard liquor and you see your blood sugar go up and say, that doesn't make sense, does make sense, because the liver is saying, oh my God, there's some whiskey here. I got to get this out. I can't manage your blood sugar right now. That's not of importance. What's of importance is getting it out, right? So we know that alcohol damages the liver. That's not news to anyone. But from the lifestyle one, so this really kind of speaks to what we're talking about today. The term non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD, has recently been changed to MASLD, which is metabolic dysfunction associated steatohepatitis liver disease. Okay. What does that mean? It's a mouthful. Basically means that it is liver disease that's caused by metabolic factors, and that creates what we look at as steatohepatitis. So how does that happen? When we think about the stages of the liver, when we think about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, these scary statistics that you're talking about, which I guarantee you they're probably a little higher. What we know is that once the liver gets to over 5 to 10% of fat, the liver starts saying, this is too much fat here. This is not normal. I need to start healing. And in the healing process, scar tissue is produced. So we now start getting scar tissue. We start getting what we call fibrosis. This is stage 2. And once we get the scar tissue, now we have all the inflammatory factors going on. So the inflammatory factors set up this kind of this storm of inflammation within the body. And we can live in this middle section for many, many, many years until we just can't anymore. And then the liver is replaced. All the healthy cells are replaced with fat, with scar tissue. Then you're in cirrhosis. Then you need a transplant. But those are the main 3 stages. And the first 2 stages, where you're getting too much fat and now you're getting scar tissue, can last years and years and years. Right? Very few people, if we look at the statistics, get to cirrhosis. It still happens. And it's more likely to happen in kids, because they just have the benefit of living longer, right? But those are the main stages of what we look at with this disease.
Okay. And so what are the symptoms that are associated with that? Because that may be kind of scary to think about for someone. And they're like, cirrhosis of the liver, like, it's bad when you're getting to that place. But like you said, it can progress over a long period of time. So what are some of the red flags and symptoms that may indicate that you are somewhere on that spectrum where the liver is being affected in a negative way? Well,
the short answer is there could be zero symptoms, which is why this is such a concerning condition. I mean, I've had patients, and I know Dr. Hananay has had patients. He's a hepatologist, so he has seen more of the clinical side of it. But he has seen patients that come in and they are in cirrhosis, and they most likely had fatty liver for probably decades, right? With no symptoms until the cirrhosis hit. So, some of the symptoms we know that can be associated are really also associated in a lot of ways with regular life. So one of them could be fatigue, right? Like you could associate fatigue with hormone imbalance, or you just are not sleeping well, right? There's all these things you can associate fatigue with. So that could be one symptom is just really, gosh, I just feel really fatigued. Brain fog could be another one. Now, again, if you are a woman that is perimenopausal or postmenopausal, that's pretty normal too. So you might never say, oh my gosh, I'm so tired and I got a little brain fog, I got to get my liver enzymes checked. Very few people say that. Instead, it's, I got to get my hormones checked and I got to make sure like everything else is working right. But we don't think about the liver. That's the last thing we think about. But those are some of the main symptoms you get. It's not till you get closer to that cirrhotic stage where you might start getting itchy skin. You might start having symptoms that almost appear to be like dementia, because of the fact that the liver is no longer able to break down ammonia from your protein that you're eating, right? So things like that, it becomes a lot more severe and a lot more evident once you really start that total replacement of healthy liver cells. But that's why I said in the first few stages that could last years, the liver is just going to keep taking it. It's just going to keep taking it. And it might not give you any of the warning signs that you might think. Oftentimes, the first warning sign is abnormal liver enzymes.
So, and we're talking about like ALT, AST.
Yep.
Okay.
AST. Yep.
And those guys, for those of you listening, like those are on a general blood panel if you're having them run, but just make sure that you're working with a provider that is looking for functional ranges, because we've had a lot of other experts that come on, and tell us like the majority of the ranges that you're looking at are based off of a sick population. So you may actually have a disease state, but be within normal ranges. So just make sure that you are looking at a tighter functional window when you're looking at those, because if you want to catch something before it is a full blown issue, you're going to have to start to see the trends. And now I want to ask this too. Are there other markers? Because I also know that thyroid hormones converted a lot in the liver. Like, are there other markers that you would look at or could point to a liver problem that are not necessarily the liver? Like maybe it's a gut problem, dysbiosis, whatever, because I think that some of those other markers can point to a bigger problem if we know what we're looking at. But a lot of times we just think if it's not something that's evaluated, liver enzymes, then there's no liver problem. But that's not always necessarily true either. Are there other things that you look at that you consider when you're looking at the overall health of the liver?
Yeah. So dysbiosis of the microbiome is definitely one thing, right? And the other thing is that the gut is obviously, it not only is feeding and getting blood from the liver, but it's close to the liver. I mean, that sounds so elementary, but it is absolutely true. Organs that are close to each other affect each other, right? So there's that component, right? And then obviously the liver has a lot to do with the gut, just looking at bile production, things like that. But really, what we look at in terms of being able to make a diagnosis, and when I say diagnosis, many hepatologists that I've worked with will say, I'm pretty sure I'm 85%, 90%. I'd like to do an ultrasound as well. But before we get to that ultrasound moments, a lot of times we're looking at hemoglobin A1C, which is a 3-month marker of blood sugar management, or we could look at your fasting blood sugar. We could look at insulin. We can look at anything that might give us a red flag of blood sugar mismanagement. Okay. So which directly ties into metabolic syndrome. We could also look at things like we could look at your lipid panel. We could look at where are your triglycerides, right? Triglycerides can be another kind of indicator, obviously an indicator of alcoholism, but can also be an indicator of mismanagement of fat within the liver as well. So, really, in addition to kind of the traditional liver enzymes, any of your metabolic markers would lead a physician to say, okay, we've got these metabolic markers. Perhaps we also are tying this in conjunction with a high waist circumference. We probably are looking at fatty liver here before we even look at liver enzymes or we look at an ultrasound. I mean, that's how prevalent it can be. I mean, someone with insulin resistance and definitely type 2 diabetes, they're about 85% likely to have fatty liver as well. So once you have that showing up in your blood work, you automatically can say, okay, we got all these things going on. We probably also have too much fat in the liver as well.
That's really good to know. So it's safe to say that if you are insulin resistant, you've got dysregulated blood sugar and even your hormones are dysregulated. This affects a number of women. They're estrogen dominant, whatever their hormone imbalance is, you have to address the liver. So in assuming, because we've got a large population of people that are metabolically imbalanced or deranged, like they're just, they do not, their blood sugar's all over the place. What is it that you feel like is the most valuable thing for people to know about supporting their liver? Is it nutrition? Is it lifestyle? Like, what are the strategies and tactics for helping someone prioritize the health of their liver so that they can have the byproduct of metabolic stability and balance?
Yeah. Well, it really is going to be dependent on that individual, right? So that's really looking at personalized nutrition. And the reason I'm giving more that general answer, because let me just say, I think nutrition is key, obviously. I mean, I'm a dietitian, so I'm so biased. But I think nutrition is key. But like, let me give you a great example, Courtney. So, for example, we had a patient come to see us, and this was a female. She had a lot of dysregulation going on, including really dysregulation in the lipid panel. So she was put on a statin. That specific statin impacted her liver enzymes in a very negative way. So her liver enzymes shot up. Right. So just because of the statin, we are now seeing that there's some damage to the liver, and we had to kind of backtrack, not we, but the physicians, and I was just part of their team, had to kind of backtrack to, okay, we need to look at a different statin that doesn't impact the liver. So that's a very specific example. I get that. But those examples are all over the place. So again, if your diet is really, really, really looking great, but you happen to be taking an herb that is not so friendly to the liver, that could throw off your liver health. So that's why it is really so specific. But if we look more high level, I would say, we need to just look at nutrient density at least 90% of the time. And I think a lot of people hear this like 80-20 rule, and that's what we see in the blue zones. And that's great. I think 90-10 is probably a better perspective, and still gives you that 10% amount of time where you can have the cookie, or, you can have something that you want without it really making a huge impact.
Yep. I mean, diet really, we talk about that like on a lot of shows. I think it is such a foundational piece. You just have to address it. And obviously, like, getting out the main offenders is huge. So if you are drinking alcohol, even if it's just like a little bit here and there, like, it is a toxin, it's a neurotoxin. And so eliminating that, like, just think about it as your organs having a certain threshold and capacity to do their job. Well, if that capacity is limited and you're trying to get it to make up ground and actually heal, you've got to limit some of the threats to it. You have to limit some of the insults to it. So removing some of the ones that okay, this isn't going to help or support the healing process. Once you can build the resiliency back, then your body has this margin and threshold to manage stressors. The problem is we're like, well, it's okay if I have a little bit here or there, but we have diminished the capacity for which our organs can function so much that it doesn't have any reserve to adapt. And that's a real problem, because now one little insult has catastrophic ramifications. Instead of just, oh, well, that was a little blip on the radar, didn't feel so well. You're like down and out for like a whole day. You've got headaches, brain fog, and it's like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to pull out of this, and And so we want you to be able to build your health. So utilizing the right tools. I always work on people's liver. I don't care. I mean, it's just like a known thing. And I do like using specific nutrients and herbs, but you were talking something pre-show. We were kind of dialoguing a little bit about fasting. And I also know how healthy fasting can be across the board just for inflammation. And when we're talking about the liver being able to regenerate and be able to become healthier, is there a correlation to fasting, not only just, resetting the microbiome and the whole inflammation as a whole, but what does fasting do to your liver in terms of helping your body recover?
Yeah, for sure. Fasting plays a role in better liver health. When we think about it, I always like to go high level, because sometimes I forget that, people that maybe didn't go to nutrition school or didn't go to medical school, whatever the case may be, like, it might not be so obvious to think about things the way we do in terms of nutrition and each and every nutrient and things like that. So if we think high level and we think about the standard American diet and we think how we eat, we as humans were not meant to eat throughout the day. It's not what our ancestors did, right? Our ancestors, if they ate once a day, like if we think about hunter-gatherers, that would have been great, but it could have been every 3 days, right? Now, unfortunately, most of our ancestors that were hunter-gatherers, they died very early. So we don't have the kind of data that we would love to have to see, would they have lived to 100? Well, we don't know. We just don't know, right? Because they were probably killed in some capacity. But we are not meant to eat throughout the day. So fasting gives our body a break from having to do all the metabolic processes that it has to do. Now, we were talking initially before the show about the concept of autophagy. So autophagy is really cellular regeneration, rejuvenation. There's been a lot of studies on autophagy. You can't get into autophagy until you're fasting at least 3 days. All right. So once you get into that, I often call autophagy as like the ultimate freak out, where the body is essentially saying, okay, there's no food. So now I'm not even relying on fat or glucose. That's gone. Now I'm relying at the cellular level. So it is essentially a spring cleanup. It goes in, looks at your body and says, okay, these cells are working great. We're going to heighten them. These cells are not working great. They're going to cause disease. They're going to cause any kind of chronic conditions you don't want. And so what I need to do is really kind of break them down and recycle them into healthier cells. So that's a really strong concept with fasting, and it takes a few days to get there. But fasting is a great way to give your body that break and to put your body more in a state of really what we're supposed to do, which is eating for hunger, which we often don't do that, right? I have all these patients that will come to me and they'll say, okay, I have at noon, I have some pretzels, and then at 2, I have this, and I'll just stop them and say, why the pretzels at noon? And many of them will say, because it's noon. Right? Many of them won't say I was really hungry, or I have pretzels because I'm going to have this activity. It's just kind of usually at noon, that's what I do. Right? So we've lost the ability to listen to our hunger and fullness cues. Fasting can really help us to kind of pinpoint that and get back to where we should be.
That's a great point. And my follow-up question to that, because I know that we've got some women listening that are probably wondering, is there somebody that is hormonally very delicate, very fragile, meaning their cycles are a little bit wonky, or somebody that has a lot of metabolic dysfunction. And I've heard arguments on both sides saying, well, you can't just do a 3-day fast for somebody that has no ability to balance blood sugar and they got high and low and they're just dizzy, I'm going to pass out. So does somebody need to work up to this? Do they metabolically need to be fit to a point that allows them to do this? Or does bringing in the fasting help hit the reset button? And maybe a little turbulent, but at the end of the day, you're going to get the inflammation down. Your body's going to recover.
Yeah. So it kind of takes on 2 different buckets, right? Bucket number 1 is I'm pretty healthy, but I've got some metabolic dysfunction. And that's really probably should talk to your doctor. Because if part of that metabolic dysfunction is blood sugar mismanagement, then fasting could be more of a dangerous thing for you to consider. And you might have to look at kind of what approach you take. But the second really speaks to the approach, we have so many different ways of fasting. For someone who's metabolically dysfunctioned, I would say, you probably don't want to start with a general water fast. In fact, I don't recommend water fasting at all. There's a lot of downsides to it, even though there's a lot of upsides to it, right? So that's kind of like one alternative. Alternate day fasting might not work. And that is when you're eating, let's say it's Monday, I'm going to eat normally today. Tuesday, I'm going to fast. Wednesday, I'm going to eat normally again, right? So time restricted eating typically can be a good starting point for most people. And that is limiting the frequency of your meals and snacks to 10 to 12 hours. Now, we've seen studies that look at 6 hours. And if you're just having food within a 6-hour time frame, does that have benefit? And it does, but it doesn't have any more benefit than the 8-hour time frame. So again, like, we don't always have to go hardcore to get some of the benefit that we see in some of the clinical trials. There was a study in Britain that came out a few years ago, and it showed that just delaying breakfast by 90 minutes and eating dinner 90 minutes earlier, just that could help with being able to get the benefits of fasting. So it's really kind of like, okay, do I need to sit down with my physician, number one? And number two, what approach am I going to look at? Because when we use this general term fasting, it's really a general term. We have so many different ways we can look at it. And so it's just, again, it goes back to the personalization of the patient.
Yep. Honestly, bio-individual all the time. And there may be seasons where you may be able to fast because you have a larger threshold for stress. So for women that maybe have young children and you're just stressed, you're not getting as much sleep, you may want to just prioritize like having enough protein, having meals that are satiating, having meals that are nutrient dense, easy to digest, high in mineral content because your adrenals are a little bit more taxed, and not push the throttle. Like, we were just talking so Kristin, guys, if you're listening, she's like in the middle of doing a fast right now. And she was like, yesterday was a little rough. Like, yesterday was the wall where I was like ready to just like throw everybody out of my house. Yeah. So, if you have like little children, do not put the pressure on yourself to maybe take something on where you don't have the capacity. You can get benefit from fasting, like you said, even just protecting a 12-hour window, like 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Like, just add an extra hour in the morning. That's not going to influence your day. Like, you're not going to be like 1 o'clock in the afternoon thinking, wow, I am not eating the rest of the day and I'm miserable. Like, I can't, handle my children's temper right now. So
I'm so happy you said that, Courtney, because it is true. We have to remember that fasting puts stress on the body. I'm doing Prolon right now, which is the fasting mimicking diet. And there's so much evidence to the benefits of it. And I'm doing 4 rounds. This is my 3rd round. But on the 2nd round, that was the first time I decided to try an Oura ring. And I was like, I'm going to wear my Oura ring the entire time I'm doing fasting. And I didn't feel like I was stressed. But my data from the Oura ring indicated that my body was in stress. And I thought that was really fascinating, right? Starting to get in day 3, 4, and 5, it just kept constantly sending me these alarms like, hey, your resilience and your stress is higher than normal. Kind of, what's going on? Let's take a look at this. And it was because I was fasting. So fasting does put a tremendous amount of stress on the body, which is why we don't do it every single day. But to your point, choosing when you do it is such a key factor. So for me, like, I know during my work week, I am work. There's a lot of stress. I'm picking up kids. I'm dropping them off. I'm going to practices. So much stress. So I like doing fasting actually on the weekends because I know I'm just going to be in a lawn chair watching baseball and I'm not going to have the stressors that come along with what the weekday looks like. So fasting for me is much more beneficial, and it helps me with drinking less, with eating less. We have weekends where people say, "Hey, can you meet us at this Mexican restaurant?" And I always joke, but it's true. I was an obese, insulin resistant child, and I've got all those demons still within me. So you put me in a Mexican restaurant, I am likely to go way overboard, way overboard. So it's just like, if I'm fasting, it's like, it forces me. I just can't do that. So that works for me, but you have to figure out what works for you in terms of the days and how frequent you're going to do it.
I mean, listen, it's the chips and guac for me that get me every time.
It's a queso for me.
I know. I mean, can anybody turn it down? I'm like, yes, I'll take the extra guac and queso. Like, yes. Yeah, I mean, it's just a part of the experience.
You know, when you see it going a little low, just keep it. The chips too.
Oh, I know. My kids are always like, can we order some extra chips and take them to go? I'm like, guys, we did enough damage. We do not need to take this home. Like, this was a isolated experience where, you know, we're all enjoying ourselves here. We do not need to, we don't need to take this home. And we'll be back.
That's your 10%, right? So that's okay. That's okay that you're going to do that, because probably the majority of the time you and your family are eating great. So go.
It is true. It's a deep battle. You know, I'm out there with all the other crunchy moms and we're, you know, batting Cheetos and what's I can't even remember what the name of these like flaming. Oh, what are those things that all the kids are eating?
Exactly what you're talking about.
Like Takis.
Takis, yeah.
Oh my gosh! If I see any more Takis, I mean, I'm out there like swatting them away from the kids. I'm like, I don't even know what this stuff is. Like, where do they even manufacture this stuff? Like, it has to be at some like chemical lab, you know, because there's like 0% that there's like one shred of anything really that, you know, originated from real food. So anyway, it's my rant on Takis. So sorry, Takis business. I mean, your demographic is not here anyway. So,
well, you know, I was assigned to snacks the other day for my kids' baseball team, and I like would choose healthy snacks. Now, I'm not going to bring a head of broccoli. Okay. I still have to be normal. All right. But I brought healthier snacks, and then I also had some apples and oranges. The apples and oranges were not touched. Not touched, right? Like, it's just like, so that's the other thing too. Like, when you look at what we used to refer to in schools as competitive foods, when you have a Taki or a Cheeto or any of those things, and you're like, you can have that, but I want you to have your apple first. No kid is going to want the apple first, right? So that's a competitive food. You're comparing an apple with a hyper palatable food. Game over. There's no competition. Right. Yeah.
There's so much psychology behind that too. And I think that like, that's where as parents, sometimes we just want to take the easy road because let's be honest, like it's not easy raising tiny little dictators sometimes. And so it's like, oh, I just need a break. But again, you're feeding into their palate and their taste buds, and it is going to be far harder for them to crave the things that are good for them. And then they're going to run into, and you'll run into parenting them with health challenges. And that's like a whole other experience. I mean, it's going to require a different level of intentionality. And so I think it does. And it's so funny because I was just at the gym talking with, you know, the other gym moms at 6 a.m. and same thing. And it was one of my friends, and she was like, I don't know what to bring these kids that's healthy, because this healthy stuff I bring, oranges, bananas, she's like, nobody touches it. And then all the kids are like, we're starving. Right. So this is it. This is an epidemic.
Yeah. Yeah. Kids are a challenge. Kids are, oh my gosh. Yeah, my kids are pretty picky. And I always say it's like karma for the 20 plus years that I've been a dietitian trying to help people eat better. That's like my karma that my own kids are like, no.
Right? This is so true. I'm like, you guys do not even know how much work I went through making the gelatin gummies for your gut right now. Like, I know they don't taste like fruit roll-ups, but you eat those gelatin gummies right now and you enjoy it. And then you thank your mother that she went through the process.
Face. Yeah, that's right.
Which, by the way, I do have a really great gelatin gummy recipe for those of you interested. I'll try and post it. And my kids are housing them. I mean, they're so good. And they're like, you know, they're just super, anyway, they're super clean, good for their gut. Okay. So I want to circle back really quick to give people some of the tactical warfare stuff for your liver. So what is it? And this obviously, you know, we realize that this is very bio-individual, but you've written books on this. You're educated, very much an expert on this. For the process for somebody that's like, yes, I do have insulin resistance. I've got some hormonal imbalances. I know I've got metabolic issues and I want to focus on my liver. What is kind of a general process from where they should start to what they want to work towards in order to maybe help their liver recover and improve their metabolic processes?
Yeah. So if you're definitely talking about blood sugar dysfunction, I would always start to look at the diet. I would look at more of a Mediterranean approach. But I think the key factor that I would recommend is where are your carbohydrates within that approach and where can we slash them? Okay. We know that a moderate carbohydrate diet, a low carbohydrate diet for sure, but even moderate carbohydrate diet. So 45% of carbs, which people are like, what? That's moderate? Yes, that's moderate. And we know that even that will provide a lot of benefit to blood sugar management. We've had studies comparing a low carb diet to a low fat diet, and we can see in a lot of cases remission of insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, et cetera. So there are benefits there. I am always so sensitive and wary, though, of kind of falling into someone else's perception of diet culture. And I never want people to think like I'm telling them, oh, you have to deprive all your carbs. No carbs for you, right? So that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like, if you're on a Mediterranean approach, you have blood sugar mismanagement, you're going to look at the fact that you're having a veggie bowl in the evening and you've got brown rice typically, and it's a cup of brown rice. You're just filling it up. Maybe swap half the brown rice with cauliflower rice or broccoli rice, right? So like little things like that. Maybe instead of having old fashioned oats, have steel cut. So now we've gone from a type of grain that has to be processed for quicker cooking to an intact grain. So little things like that. We're not talking about like slashing all your carbs. Okay. So that's kind of number one. And I think the key factor here is fiber, which really just speaks to the microbiome and speaks to the gut health in general. The inefficiency of the body to break down fiber leads to that production of short-chain fatty acids, et cetera. So I think that's a huge one. So let's look at our carb content. Number one, number two, how much color do we have in the diet? Right? So color makes a huge difference. Color has phytochemicals. We know that color has nutrients. So when people come to me and they're like, hey, I'm good, Kristin, because I have a gigantic kale salad every day. So I'm good. And I have like an apple. Well, that's only 2 colors. So you're not good. Like, let's get another green in there. Let's get another cruciferous in there. And then where can we get some other colors? Even if it comes from something that we're not thinking about, like dark chocolate. So how many colors do you have in your diet? I tell my patients get 7 colors in every day. So instead of focusing on this, perception of the, get servings of fruits and vegetables. So colors, I think, is really important. And then where are you snacking and how much are you snacking? There's assessments looking at how much we snack. What is the amount of calories we're getting from snacking, et cetera. It's averaging about 500 calories per day. That's too much, especially for females that have hormonal imbalance, mitochondrial imbalance, anything like that. That's too much. So really kind of taking a deep dive into your diet, looking at those 3 components and then starting there. And then going off of the diet. What is my sleep? Sleep is a huge component that we often don't think about. If I'm stressed, am I managing that stress? Or am I just letting cortisol constantly be pumped into my body? So all of those things are important, but from the dietary perspective, that's where I would start.
That's so good. And, Dr. Motley's not on here right now, but I'll just plug what I know he would say. If you're waking up between the hours of 1 and 3 a.m., those are your liver hours, according to the Chinese clock. So if you're waking up during that window of time, that's likely you can pretty much assume that you've got a liver problem. Now, if you're just waking up sporadically, like here and there, I wouldn't say, oh, you've got a liver issue. But if you're pretty consistent between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., that's the time of your liver. So you're waking up because there is something in the liver that's not being regenerated. That's the time the body moves through this cycle where different organ systems are prioritized, where it can start to regenerate and it can rebuild and energy can move to that organ system. If the energy is not getting to that organ system to repair the damage, then you will wake up. There's cortisol. There are other processes that kick in, stress responses that end up disturbing what would be the window of time where the body is prioritizing that organ. So that always gets me thinking. You guys can look this up too. We can even put it in the show notes. But if you just look up Chinese medicine clock, you'll see where all the different organs fit in, because there are all different times, not just at night, but all throughout the day. And if you're noticing you've got problems, like you've got headaches or you've got fatigue or, craving, whatever it is, start looking at what organ is positioned within that hour that you're feeling some of these symptoms. And a lot of times that'll clue you in as to maybe where some imbalances are. So anyway, I just had to plug the little Chinese medicine stuff for my partner in crime who's not here, but he had his moment.
It's fascinating. And I think that's really interesting. And it's also why we see like connections with lack of sleep, low quality sleep, and the increased risk of Alzheimer's and dementia, right? Now that's looking at a different organ, but the inability of the brain to be able to kind of reset, recycle, all of those things that the brain needs to do during our sleep. Once we wake up, then you're out of that mode of being able to kind of go through that. So it's just really, sleep is so important. This is especially challenging for my peri and postmenopausal female patients because of the fact that oftentimes just being in this state, when you have hot flashes, things like that, you're going to wake up in the middle of the night and your sleep is going to be disrupted. So that could put us right down the rabbit hole of like, okay, well, like, many of my patients come and they're taking melatonin or they're taking all these other things. Is that helping or harming, right? But sleep is such a huge component. And I often say, like, from a food perspective, when you have a night where you got an all-nighter and you're just not sleeping or you're tossing and turning, the next day, you never are craving that kale salad. You're like, where's the pizza? Because I want half of it. You're never like, oh man, I just want some broccoli today. That never happens after you lose sleep. So we have a clear dysfunction of the hormones that control when we're supposed to be hungry and giving us that sign and when we're supposed to be full. So ghrelin and leptin are completely mismanaged when we can't sleep.
That's so good. Yeah. I mean, honestly, how many of us have like such a rough day after having a night where your sleep is compromised? Like, I'm craving food all the time. I feel like I can never get full. We just don't get recovered. So the tank doesn't get refilled. So we're working with minimal reserves. And so it's no surprise that we can even eat the same foods we're used to eating and have a different response to them. And this is missed a lot of times too, because we'll be thinking, well, I'm eating all my normal sweet potatoes and my protein and everything, but your blood sugar will actually respond differently because of the lack of sleep, because now you have carried over a negative deposit from the day before into your next day. And now you're working from limited capacity. And that stress, that added stress burden then really influences the way that your metabolism can regulate energy throughout the day. So that's important to realize, because if you're making decisions for your health on a day-by-day basis, which many of us should, you may need to adjust your eating, your exercise, the things that you're committing to doing if you can. I realize not everybody can just be like, well, I'm not taking care of my kids and I'm not showing up for my job. But there are things that you could probably say, I just can't. Like, I need to just lay down and rest for 20 minutes in the middle of the day because I was up with my child all night long. Yeah. I do this on a regular basis. Like, it does not mean you're not productive. It means that you're actually taking a moment to realize that your body needs a different approach because of what happened the day or the night before.
Yeah. And that's okay. And I think especially as women, we oftentimes don't give ourselves that ability to take that break. I was watching I think I was watching an Instagram reel the other day, but it really spoke to me. And it was a mom taking a 20-minute nap. And it just talked about the guilt she felt because during that 20 minutes, she could have folded laundry or she could have put together the shopping list. But how much more important that 20-minute nap was than those other actions, right? So I just thought that was it was really interesting, because I do think we kind of, we beat ourselves up. Because if we have 5 extra minutes, we feel we need to fill the space with something productive, and we don't always have to be productive. Right?
No, in fact, it can be more productive to just stop and slow down. I am like fully embracing that season right now, and I got to be honest. I took a break from social media. I took a break from everything, and I was like, this is great. Like, the first day, I was like, I might have an anxiety attack because I feel like the world is moving around me, and I decided to stop, and it makes me feel like I'm slacking or I'm not doing enough or I'm being left behind. That's really the deep root of it, is everybody else is moving past me and I'm not getting behind. But once you get over that, let me tell you, it is a free place to be. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sit in my lawn chair in the sun for, I don't know, an hour if I want to, and in dead silence. And it is a beautiful thing. So ladies, take that time.
I love it. Take that time. Take that time. Yeah.
It honestly, I'll be honest, guys, we could split hairs all day long about your body. If we can learn the art of being still, you can gain more for your health than taking a million herbs and supplements and biohacking tools and therapies ever will.
For sure.
I mean, it is I mean, just like you said, like sleep is so important. It's like, this is not difficult stuff. It's not rocket science, but it is really hard. Bless you.
Thank you.
It's really hard to sleep well when you're running on fumes all day long. So set yourself up for success. If you actually take moments to rest throughout the day, you will sleep better at night. Sometimes we think, well, we'll just wear ourselves out until we black out. And I'm like, that's really not the way that we need to approach sleep. And then we just take, some type of sleep inducing drug in order to help us fall asleep. But, running full throttle until you crash and burn is just not sustainable. And we're seeing it take its toll on people's health, every single day.
And just your comment that you made about sitting in a lawn chair with the sun on your face, right? Which obviously is going to be a great source of vitamin D. We can talk about that. But the other thing, other component to that is just being in nature. We have all these studies that show that simply being in nature helps us reset. It helps cortisol go down. It helps all of those things reset. So again, if your break is, I'm just going to walk around the block. I told this to my 11-year-old the other day. He was just so upset that I wouldn't do something with him in the house at that moment. And I said, listen, if you just let me go walk for a half hour, I will be 500 times better mom to you. That half hour, right? And then we can do all the things you want to do. But again, like taking that half hour and just sitting in the sun or maybe taking a walk around the block can just do huge amounts for your patience, even with your kids.
So I'm going to start using that with my kids. I'm going to be like, do you want nice mom right now? Or do you want crazy mom? Because you give me 30 minutes, your world can look a lot better. Or
only 30 minutes.
I know it's not a big ask. Let's be honest, guys. We're not asking for a lot. Give me 30 minutes just to be by myself.
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
A marathon. Yeah.
No. Drag your kids too. I make the kids go outside with me all the time now. I'm like, get your bodies outside in the sun. Like, we need to do this. So this is so good.
Of being near the ocean. I have the benefit of being near mountains. So, very, very healing places. But really, even if you don't have those things, just getting out and being near trees. Just being near trees. We've got data on that too. So sitting under a tree can have a profound effect on your mental health. I mean, guys, if you ever feel bad, I kid you not, I'm straight redneck and I have no shame about it. And I drag my neon, I don't know, gas station lawn chair out into the driveway. I mean, people yesterday must have thought I had lost Marley was eating the sidewalk chalk. Okay. Mars 1.5. And I was just sitting in my lawn chair with my shorts rolled up and I with my sunglasses. I'm just straight chilling. And at one point I looked over and Marley had sidewalk chalk, it was a popsicle. And she's just going to town on this thing. And I thought, man, people just walk by, they would be like, are these people okay? But I was like, I'm just out here getting some sun and just listening to the birds and the people that were doing their landscaping with the blowers that were kind of driving me crazy. But all that to say, I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I'm sure Marley did too. She's still alive to tell the tale. The sidewalk chalk did not poison her. So I don't know what kind of, coloring they use. It's the little moments, right? Yeah. 100%. So, just be like, I'm going to drag that chair out in the yard. No shame. Yep. Oh my goodness. I don't know how we ended up there, but that's where the conversation went, Kristin. We went from liver to lawn chairs. Yeah. Yeah. It's always comes full circle. I mean, just getting down to real life. This is it, guys. It is real life. Yeah. This is so good. So, okay. Well, tell us about your books. Tell us about your work because you have a lot of resources for people. Your books are phenomenal and they're very educational. They're very step-by-step. They're great tools for people. So if you're looking to kind of take things in your own hands, which we're always proponents for, what can people learn from you, your resources, and where can they find this stuff? Yeah. So, in my first book, Skinny Liver, was really just kind of, I wrote it because I had all these patients coming in saying, hey, my doctor tells me I've got fatty liver. There's no drug for it. I don't know what to do. He said, go see you. Right. And I was like, oh, okay. So there was no manual. There was nothing. So it's really just a huge assessment of liver health in general. And then just kind of some tips. Regenerative Health, which is the second book, is really opened up to anyone with misfunction of their metabolic profile. So really, it's not just about the liver. The liver is kind of the highlight, but it's really anyone that has any component of metabolic syndrome, and goes much deeper into the dietary aspects, things like that. You can find them on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can get them through my website, which is just KristinKirkpatrick.com, Kristin spelled with an I. But really, it's like anyone that just wants to eat a little bit better, get a little bit more nutrient density, I think can benefit from either of the books. Just for some tips on that, because I do talk a lot about sleep and I talk about stress management, and all those perspectives. And my co-author is like world-renowned hepatologist. So he has seen, unfortunately, people die from cirrhosis. He has been there during the transplantation. So he's got that medical insight that I don't have. Which is why I think it's great that our worlds kind of aligned or collided together to give you the dietary and the medical perspective.
So good. Yeah, I've been doing liver work for a long time. Mostly because I've had a lot of toxin issues. And I also, fun fact, I had hepatitis A in high school, and from eating at this restaurant, which I didn't want to eat at. And I still hold it against my parents because they like forced our family to go to this restaurant. But somehow I was the only person that got the bad onions with hepatitis. There was like a whole outbreak. It was all over the news. It was crazy. But anyway, I missed like half my senior year in high school because I was like so sick. And back then I didn't know anything. Neither did my parents, bless. I mean, it was a rough go for a while, but ever since then, obviously, you know, that severely impacts your liver. And so I am like the world's biggest advocate for a coffee enema. I do all kinds of liver support, you know, in every way possible. So anyway, you guys are learning fun facts about me. You may now think differently.
No, I mean, actually, I give you a little bit more respect, because then, you know, it's like once you go through something horrible and you realize how just awful you feel when your liver dysfunctions, you are so motivated to make sure it never happens again. And that's exactly what happened.
It was, honestly, I have never in my life felt so bad. And at the time, nobody, you know, even my parents didn't realize that. I mean, who would think that their senior in high school would have hepatitis A? And I was so itchy. My skin, I remember I literally had itched the skin off. Like I was bleeding because the toxins couldn't get out of my body. The whites of my eyes were totally yellow. I mean, I was just so sick. And I remember looking it up online where you have to like dial up internet. And I started searching and I told my parents, I was like, I think I have hepatitis A. And they were like, there's no way. Like, well, how would you even get that? I drove myself to the health center, the health department in Asheville, North Carolina. I walked in and I told them, I have hepatitis A. I need a test. Yeah. And sure enough, they told me, no. Well, I was like, I need somebody to look at this. Turns out it was. And within a week, there were like 20 other people that were also had it, and they traced it all back to this restaurant. But anyway, all that to say, yeah, if your liver is not functioning, you will at some point, it will catch up to you and you will really not feel your best. But our liver can get a lot of ongoing support from our diet, from our lifestyle, reducing the toxic burden, right? Because the liver, everything's got to go through the liver. And even bringing in a lot of nutritional support. And there's great herbs. I love milk thistle is a great one. N-acetylcysteine can be helpful. B vitamins, helping facilitate all the processes of detoxification, which also help you assimilate nutrients better, like we talked about earlier in the podcast. So, I mean, there's just so many things. I think we can just, all the accolades of the liver, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
We love it. Well, Kristin, this has been so fun. Can you give us real quick plug, website, social media, so those of our listeners that want to follow you, learn more, and get their hands on all the things you're working on, where they can access that?
That'd be awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So Instagram and Facebook, my handle is Fuel Well with Chrissy. So just as it sounds, Fuel, well, Well, and then with Chrissy. Because when you fuel well, you feel well. So there's like a little, kind of twinge of nutritional psychology there. Website is KristinKirkpatrick.com. So Kristin spelled with an I. And, really, I'm constantly putting up recipes, guidance, insight, things like that on different topics. So yeah, appreciate you letting me plug all of that. And that's a great way for individuals to get in contact with me as well.
So good. Well, this has been fun. I mean, we've really covered a lot. And guys, I hope you have enjoyed this. I know maybe you got a laugh in there. We just kind of, I'm always one for a good rabbit trail and just random little facts about, the world we live in. But hey, we're doing real life together and we're all in it. So I just want for you to feel seen and have value. And I know that this conversation has, blessed me. So I hope that it has impacted you and brought value to your life. You've got some tools under your belt that you can work with. Kristin, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. We're so excited and grateful to have you. Guys, we'll plug everything in the show notes for you. If you love this episode, like it, share it. We love reviews. So let us know, hit us up. We always read them. Means a lot to get your feedback because we want to know how we can better serve you. We will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks for joining us.